Hello and welcome. I'm Sarah Bearup-Neal, Gallery Manager with the Glen Arbor Arts Center. Today I'm in conversation with artist Margo Burian, whose work has been selected to be displayed in the Glen Arbor Arts Center's outdoor gallery through April 2025. The outdoor gallery project began in 2020, and in this case, the gallery walls are the front-facing outer walls of the Arts Center's building. Each year, we select a new artist and invite him or her to exhibit work. Original paintings are selected and then reproduced and printed onto 5-foot by 5-foot aluminum weather-resistant panels by our partners in this project, and those partners are Image 360 and Traverse City. Margo Burian is a familiar face in Traverse City and a cornerstone of this area's visual art community, and we're delighted to have her work on the walls this year. Welcome, Margo.
Oh, thank you. And thank you and the Glen Arbor Art Center for selecting me for this opportunity. I'm really excited about it.
In the decades that you've translated the locality's beachscapes, landscapes, historic farmsteads in your painting, you've approached these subjects as a painter. The works we'll be displaying in the outdoor gallery aren't paintings, but collages. And I'm going to put one up in just a second for a point of reference. You've also departed in these collages from the subjects for which you are very intimately known. So why don't you talk about that? And
Yeah.
I'll get this baby up on the screen.
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. When this opportunity came up, I took this as a way to sort of push the work a little further. I've been doing collage for years, and when this opportunity came up, I thought this would be an excellent opportunity to push the collage and also push the subject matter a little. And while the subject matter is not as far a departure as one might think, it still is a departure for the work that I've been making over the last number of years, in the fact that I am now pushing into not just a representation of the landscape, but also the creatures that inhabit the landscape. So that's kind of a new and for me a very exciting turn that the work is taking.
Your paintings are, when I think of them and I scan my mental Rolodex, they're about places that have been inhabited, but you don't see the inhabitants.
Correct.
Places that people visit, but you never see the people. So in these collages, you're adding, as you mentioned, more sentient beings. Talk a little bit about why you're telling these stories through collage as opposed to creating paintings around the same ideas.
That's an interesting question, because I do think there are paintings coming with these type of ideas and this type of imagery. But when this opportunity presented itself, I started thinking back to what would I really want to do that would be different, that would be fun. And I started thinking about the collage that I had exhibited in the swimming competition. That was, for me, in many ways, a turning point in collage, as far as the size, the subject matter. It was especially considering it was one of the first larger pieces that I've done with the figure, and it was a little bit of a return to the figure. That image just was this image, and there was some things about this that were so compelling when I was making it. Trying to figure out how to represent water and landscape and figures in a cohesive way using painted paper. Not a painting on a paper, but pieces literally of painted paper cut and spliced together. So when this opportunity came up, it really seemed like a natural offshoot to move the work forward.
That particular collage was exhibited in our summer 2023 exhibition, Swimming. And for people who happen to miss this, that particular piece was selected as best of show for a lot of different reasons. One of which is something you started to hit on. Your collages have a very painterly quality to them in some ways. The ways you deal with values, color values, depicting lights and darks. But talk a little bit about how the two mediums inform each other. How does your painting inform your collage, and your collage tell you more about your painting?
You know, they both are so closely intertwined. Oftentimes when I'm painting, if I'm stuck in an area, say if I'm working on an oil painting and the painting isn't working and I'm trying to figure out whether or not to make big passes or big changes on that painting, I very oftentimes will take pieces of collage paper and cut and try to fit them into the idea of how I may want to change things. And then using collage as a way to make corrections, especially in painting, for me is a real easy way to have almost an undo edit feature like you would in Photoshop. But I also think that painting informs the collage for me because I'm always thinking as a painter, how can I make, for example, this is a little mini collage that has kind of a painterly feel to it. And usually they begin with painted imagery, and then I start to think about values and cut the shapes into the corresponding values. And I really think that hand in hand, those two different mediums really play well off each other. And I also find that if I get really stuck with painting, sometimes it's really good for me to take a break from painting and completely switch gears and move into the realm of collage.
Kind of like a little break.
Yeah, and I think, you know, for whatever reason it may be, for me, painting feels sometimes a little more serious than collage. Collage, I started as a way of playing and experimentation, and there's a freedom in it, and it's very, in some ways, very forgiving. Because if you don't like something you've glued down, you can just glue something right over the top and completely change it.
It's a well-kept secret.
Oh, yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about the materials you use in your collages. I think sometimes collage is just viewed very narrowly from an historic perspective, where people associate text and torn images from magazines and newspapers, and that's collage. But I want you to talk a little bit about your materials that you're creating for these collages.
Yeah, so I've had the very good fortune to study a number of times with a man by the name of Ken Cooley, who he's a painter and a collage artist as well. And some of the big takeaways I've got from studying with him is the materials themselves and making your own collage material. It doesn't have to be complicated. I never have been a big fan of ripping magazines and pasting things down. I think I'm approaching it from a little different aspect, but when I started studying with Ken Cooley, I started to learn about making my own materials. For example, and this is the materials. These are painted sheets of copy paper. I'm giving you all my secrets right now, but it's simple copy paper. And when I'm working, I generally, at the end of a work session, I will, use up my paint and use that to make the papers. And so that was kind of the start of the painted papers. But as I have kept doing this, I'm always looking for ways to make the materials more. And that's kind of led into using rollers, using jelly plates, and really starting to push the aspect of the paper. For example, let's see if I can pull these out easily. You can see I've already kind of gotten into this one, but this was a jelly plate print that I ended up doing a number of layers of paint on. So it's giving me all of this texture. You can run pieces of cardboard through. I guess I literally did say I'm telling you all my secrets, right? Tools like this that create texture on the surface of the painter. These are just little, I forget what they call these, shapers, but really anything that can change the mark, anything that can add texture to surfaces.
And
Yeah.
the really lovely thing about collage is when you're sifting through your papers, you can isolate just the tiniest little mark that appeared spontaneously through whatever method you use and cut it out. And you have that glorious luxury of picking and choosing what kind of marks you want to bring into the composition.
Yes. And one of the things, the danger of that for me is like, I can be a little bit of a hoarder, and I may find a little tiny scrap of paper, maybe less than a half inch by a half inch. And I might think, oh, this is so cool. I need to save this for something. Well, you could end up with just giant boxes of things that are a half inch by a half inch if you start hoarding those. So I've really been trying to diligently get rid of some of those things.
The voice in one's head that always says, you never know when you might need
Might
this,
use this. Yes,
is
exactly.
very loud, especially when little scraps of a quarter inch or smaller are calling you, save me.
Don't throw me out.
The other thing that I really enjoy about the whole subject of making one's own materials is the original voice and the original vocabulary you can bring to your work when you're creating your own materials, as opposed to sourcing them from big commercial outlets.
100%. And when, especially in the making of the papers, and the experimentation of making the papers, the collage, especially with some of the images that I'm working on for the outdoor gallery, I already know what the 5 images are. But with making of the papers, it adds this whole element of surprise because you don't really know, especially with some of the more abstract papers, how those papers are going to end up. So it gives you this vast array of some really interesting stuff to work with.
Margo, I'm going to screen share again. And I'm going to put up this wonderful little piece of the owl and the tree. And I want you to use this as a point of reference as we talk about some other aspects of your work. You know, there's so many details in these pieces to enjoy. So I'd like you to put on your docent's hat.
Okay.
And talk a little bit about what you'd like visitors and viewers to know about what they're seeing on the walls.
Yeah, so my running theme for this project really has been magical Leelanau. And there are things that I am fascinated with. One of them is obviously the wildlife that is turning up in these images. And because I like funny bits of information, and I also do a lot of research and information gathering as I'm coming up with these ideas. I have a tendency to do a lot of information gathering online. And like, because I like to know perhaps, for example, the owl. The owl was taken from a photograph I took a couple of years ago about an owl of an owl who was alongside the road and just posed this beautiful pose for me. And as I was looking at my image, I realized I couldn't see what color his eyes were. So I decided to start doing a deep dive and, okay, let's look up owl eyes and see what colors. And it turns out I find out that owls' eyes generally indicate what type of hunter they are. Owls with dark eyes are generally, or black or brown eyes, generally do the majority of their hunting at night. Their eyes also are tubular shaped. They're not round little orbs like most other mammals have. And so, it's those kind of things that I think also for me are the bits of magic, finding those things out. In the image, what the fox? The fox, as it turns out, which is new information to me, is the only canine species or dog-like species that has retractable claws. So, it's just me enjoying the whole process, which is doing information gathering, finding out a little bit more about my subjects, and also, finding enjoyment in some of the imageries, because there's a part of me that also wants some accuracy. So I do have a tendency to make sure that what I'm trying to depict is fairly accurate.
I think, and we talked a little bit about this before, even if one can't perceive the fox's claws being retractable in your work, I still think somehow that knowledge gets communicated in some way into the composition. And people may never know that they've walked away with that. It's kind of like seeding your compositions with some of these wonderful pieces of information, the molecules of them.
Yeah, yeah. And and it's also, it makes for me, it makes it easy to talk about the pieces because sometimes it's not always easy to connect with people, but if people are asking you about the work, and then you have, well, I can talk about the work and I can also talk about the subject in these ways that are very tangible. So I think that for both myself and the viewer, those things end up really having a deeper content.
I agree. I agree.
And by the way, I do want to mention the eyes on that owl are not quite finished because I haven't come up with just the right shape. So that will be finished before they go up on the outside gallery wall.
Well, to be continued on that one.
Yes.
You know, one of the things I am often curious about when people are so closely tied with a medium, and in this case, you're so closely associated with painting, and for very good reason. But what are the challenges that come with trying to create work and to work in other materials and techniques that are not what you're closely associated with? How do you break out of the silo?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I'm not 100% sure that I know the answer to that, other than I have to do what feels authentic and right to me. And I also have to not, I find that if I start doing one thing and only one thing, I have a tendency to start boring myself. So, and maybe in a very public way, I am saying, you know, I want to stretch myself. I'm not someone who's ever just content making the same types of things. I'm always trying to push into a place of uncomfortableness, and changing what you're doing is not comfortable. You know,
Sure.
waking up one morning and going, well, I'm not going to paint for 6 months. I'm only doing collage right now. Or I'm not going to do collage right now. I'm going to only do painting, and that kind of moving between different medias. Me, what that does is it continually keeps reigniting places in my brain that spark and say, yeah, this feels good. Let's do it. You're uncomfortable, but like take pleasure in the uncomfortableness. And I find that, you know, when I return back to whatever thing I just left doing, I come back with it with a really fresh approach, being reinformed by all sorts of new ideas from when I was moving in the space of a different media. And, you know, part of that may be a little bit of the variety of projects I had when I was a commercial illustrator, because from day to day, I would literally jump ship from one day I'm doing marker renderings to the next day I'm making pastel illustrations for a children's book, to the following week I'm doing digital illustration for teacher bulletin boards. So I had this real wide scope of projects. And I think that for me, I'm not someone who's just ever going to be comfortable just going, I'm an oil painter, that's all I'm ever going to do. I feel like I like to have the variety. And as my yoga teacher used to always say, no effort is ever wasted in your practice. And I think that really applies to painting as well, because none of the collage work that I'm doing is wasted. It informs when I switch back to painting. It informs all the painting. When I switch from painting to, say, you know, just drawing in my sketchbook, that all that experience from collaging and painting starts to inform the sketchbook. The sketchbook moves me back into painting or collage. So I don't think any of that effort is wasted. Maybe it's a little schizophrenic, but I don't think it's wasted effort at all.
I don't think we were put on this earth to stand in one place.
No, I definitely don't.
I want to let everyone know that the work that is displayed in the outdoor gallery, your work is viewable 24/7 from May 2024 through April 2025. It's a good place to come with the kids, stand around and think a lot about what you're looking at. People can also read about you, Margo, by going to glenarborart.org and click on the exhibits tab. And we'll have more information about you and a link to the longer conversation we did for the creativity Q&A project. So thank you, Margo. This has been lovely.
Thank you.
And thanks to the Amy L. Clark Carroll's Family Fund and Image 360 for their support of the Outdoor Gallery project, for which we're very grateful. And thank you to you for watching, and we'll see you next time.